Greetings and welcome to episode 1 of Van Man Talks podcast. I'm super excited about this. I've been working on this for the last couple of weeks now. I'm looking to bring you an episode every week with a new guest. I'm specifically interested in looking into all the different areas of the country. We know Britain is on its knees right now. We have a new government, for better or worse. I'm interested. I want to talk to people in their field and experts in their field. I want to talk to teachers about education. I want to talk to nurses about NHS. I want to talk to police officers about policing and economic experts about economics. I'm really interested in how we turn this country around. And my first guest, back by popular demand, is my dad. Now, I want to start off with a nice, comfortable setting. And you guys like my dad previously. I've done a podcast with him a while back. A conversation with my Brexit voting dad. So back by popular demand is my dad. We're going to be talking about the new Labour government. We're going to be talking about how the winter fuel allowance affects him as a pensioner and his thoughts on Brexit as he voted for Brexit all those years ago. Right, so anyway, Dad, I'm going to ask you, so last time you were on, we talked quite heavily about Brexit. If you guys watching didn't see the last video, I'll put a link down below. You can go and watch it. It was called A Conversation with My Brexit Voting Dad. And you were quite open and honest
how
about...
a son can slaughter a father in an hour.
Well, that's what was so interesting about the video, because it was kind of your role reversal with Brexit. You know, you were very passionate about it at the time. You voted for Brexit. And you have definitely changed your mind now. So that was the video that we done before, and we might touch on Brexit again later on. But what I'm interested to talk to you about today is, so you went down the road of Brexit. You said you even voted for Boris Johnson in 2019, but this election, you've gone back to your traditional roots of voting Labour. So you voted for Keir Starmer.
I certainly did.
I want to ask you how you're feeling about that, especially bearing in mind the winter fuel allowance and you're a pensioner
I knew
now.
you'd ask this question, and funny enough, I am actually taking your advice that you and the sort of conversation you and I have had when we've had nights out and things, that to view virtually 99% of the media that comes across in newspaper, TV, or online as being very, very sketchy. So I'm hearing a lot of, it seems like most of the media have got it in for Keir Starmer. All you're hearing is bad news. And I'm going to wait until we actually get the budget before I really believe anything, because at the moment they're sending all sorts of horror stories out. But obviously, because he took away the heating allowance as his first option, that did grate somewhat.
Yeah, I understand that. I completely understand that. I put out a video about it.
From a personal point of view, I would accept the fact, the sheer fact I'm still working, I would accept the fact that I would not be necessarily entitled to it. But I do know a lot of people who are literally, all their total income is in state pension. They're not entitled to pension credit, just the state pension.
Yeah.
And they are really worried for the coming winter.
Yeah.
It felt a bit of a shame that a Labour government, their very first thought is to hit the lower paid.
I completely agree, and the way you started by saying, don't trust what you hear in the media, I agree with, because there is a lot of crazy stuff floating around at the moment. They're taking away pensioners' bus passes. They're going to take away the council tax, single person council tax allowance, and all these sort of things. But
I've even heard they're going to scrap pensions altogether.
Yeah, so I mean,
just die.
Some of this stuff is absolute garbage, and you said, look, all you said that in the media is all you're hearing is just people moaning, and of course that is what sells. That's what people want to hear. They don't want to hear about the good stuff. They want to moan because we're England, and this is what we do in England. We moan constantly, and that's what people want to hear in the media. They're not going to put out a report about something good because no one cares. They want to moan. They want to say this and that. But I remember speaking to you like straight away when this fuel allowance was announced, And
Yeah, around it. Yeah,
you were really upset about it, and understandably so. Like I just said, the journey that you had from being a Brexit voter to voting for Boris Johnson and then doing a U-turn and going back to Labour and voting for Keir Starmer, you felt very, very let down when this was announced.
well, I
Very let
think you
down.
have to, you have to bear in mind, uh, I've admitted that I was silly in the fact that I listened to the media. I got caught up on the hype of how Brexit was going to be so brilliant. I was caught up on the hype of how Boris Johnson was going to sort the country out. And so, I've had all these years of being fed false information. And I thought, like you, okay, let's give Labour a chance. I think the words you actually used was, if it's boring politics, then boring politics is what we need at the moment. And so I thought, yeah, well, I'm happy with that. He seems like a fairly straight sort of guy. Vote for him. And I felt at that point in time, he'd only been in, was it 2 weeks? And the first thing he does, he can think to do, is to take money away from pensioners
Yeah.
who haven't got many money. Um, and I thought, well, hang on, you were supposed to be taking money away from the rich. Your first thought is to take it away from the poor. Which direction are you going?
Mm. Yeah.
And that's why I thought, then I calmed down after you and I had that chat, and I thought, well, hang on a minute, let's not be swayed by what the media's saying. Uh, let's see facts. Let's see what the budget actually has in store.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I completely agree, and it did take me by surprise the fuel allowance because,
Hmm.
I mean, when they first came in, we had the honeymoon period. You know, I was really positive when he first come in. That straight away they done some really good things. They scrapped the Rwanda scheme, an obvious ridiculous waste of money.
Yeah.
We had Ed Miliband coming out with the investment in renewable energies. They're going to scrap new oil and gas contracts. They're going
Now,
to
I've always
focus.
liked Ed Miliband, actually.
Yeah, I like Ed Miliband, and thing is with Ed Miliband is he wasn't a leader, but where he is now is a perfect position for him. So his job right now is to make Britain energy efficient and renewable energies, invest in renewable energies, and make us self-sufficient with energy, which is a fantastic thing to do.
Yeah.
So we had all these things that looked really positive. The new renters bill, where I mean, you yourself are a renter right now. You know they're going to cap extortionate rent rises, all these sort of changes to the law that they're going to do, and it looked great. It looked great, and then they came out with the winter fuel allowance, and it really did take me by surprise.
I think, yeah, even you were a bit shocked by that one, wasn't you?
I was, yeah. But the thing is, I mean, it's hard to say that Labour were from the get go saying that they were going to try and take money from the rich. I mean, they did actually win this election on almost a sort of David Cameron style economics of balancing the books, not doing anything too crazy. That was what they wanted to.
Yeah.
You know, they said that it's going to be hard times. It was almost like David Cameron in 2010, the way that Labour and Keir Starmer won this
I
election.
agree. And yeah, perhaps it was the wrong use of words to say that Labour said they were going to take the money from the rich. Um, no, I didn't expect them to actually raid the coffers of every rich person, but I just felt that that was a knee jerk reaction. Suddenly,
Unnecessary.
we need some money. Oh, there's a nice little pot in the winter fuel. Let's grab it. Whereas if he'd sat down and thought about it, it could have been done on a sliding scale. As I say, I wouldn't. I don't necessarily. I could have been the other side of that scale where I don't receive it, but I know of a. There's a lot of people who should receive it, and I totally disagree with paying winter fuel and all sorts of benefit payments to people who are rich.
Yeah.
Uh, because really, if you've got an income above a certain figure, really, why should you be receiving benefits?
Yeah, I think most people agree with the fact that in principle, it's a good policy. There's a lot of pensioner millionaires out there that
Yeah,
receive this
yeah,
that
yeah.
don't need it. But the issue is the threshold, and the threshold is for a single pensioner is £11,000 a year. And I'm sorry, but £11,000 a year, if you're earning that, you're in poverty. I mean,
Yeah,
that's less than a
yeah.
thousand pound a
Well,
month. If you're a private renter,
what's that? That probably wouldn't even pay your rent.
if you're a
If you're
private
renting
renter,
privately, what we talking about rent in this part of the world? Um, anything between 700 and £1,200 a month, isn't it?
yeah, yeah.
Just for a flat.
Yeah, and it did take me by surprise. But I mean, going back to voting for Labour, so I voted for Labour, but I even on the day I was contemplating whether to do it. I didn't go down to the voting booth singing and dancing that I'm going to vote Labour. I voted for Labour because historically they have always been slightly better for the working person, for the working class. Even I know that you have your grievances with Tony Blair and even that era. Just generally, I mean, we have this choice between the two. Really, that's what it comes down to. And Labour have always been slightly better. When you look at education standards, when you look at the standard of the NHS, I mean, think about the NHS in 2010 compared to what it's like now. All these sort of things have always been marginally better. And when I previously voted for Labour, when I'd voted for Jeremy Corbyn's Labour or Ed Miliband's Labour, I'd actually been excited to vote for Labour. It was actually, I think there's actually someone that's going to make real change. But Starmer's Labour is certainly, I knew it's not a million miles away from David Cameron's Conservatives in 2010. It's really not. The things they're saying and doing, they want to balance the books, they want to be cautious, they don't want to spend too much. And I'm not an economist, and I don't know whether that's a thing that is needed right now or not. But
I think this country will only accept the middle of the road policies. Really, it
yeah,
doesn't like extremes in either direction.
no,
So yeah, the lines between a David Cameron Conservative and a Keir Starmer Labour probably are very close, aren't they?
mm, yeah. But I
Well,
really don't want to hammer this Labour government already. I mean, it's been
I don't.
3 months, and I do realise the absolute insane task that they have to sort this country out. I mean, literally every single aspect of this country is down the pan.
Well, we've just had
Education,
15 years of the Conservatives selling Britain
yeah,
off bit
yeah,
by bit,
yeah,
and you mentioned about Ed Miliband and renewable energy. I'd like to see all our utilities brought back into this country
mm,
because why? I don't understand the Conservatives why other countries control our utilities.
yeah. And
And
that's generally a
so I'm
popular
supporting them
policy.
on that front 100%.
It's generally a popular policy with
Yeah,
either side of the political spectrum, with the general
yeah.
public. For I mean, especially water right now with what's going on
Well,
with
yeah.
the sewage. Trains has always been a popular policy with the public to renationalise trains and energy. But this is the crux of the argument, and this is what I struggle with sometimes because economics is really not my forte, and I do struggle with economics sometimes. Is what Keir Starmer is bringing forward is the status quo. He's looking after big businesses' interests because he's obviously had to do some dodgy deals to get Labour back into power. And it's almost like, I mean, you just said it yourself, that the public don't like anything radical. They won't vote for it. We saw this
No.
with Jeremy Corbyn. So you almost have to appease the public by doing this, balancing the books, economics. But there's so many people out there and so many economists that will say that you don't need to run the country like a household. You don't need to balance the books. It doesn't matter. You can borrow a lot of money if you're investing. that money into improving public services. If you borrow a hell of a lot of money and you invest it in the NHS, people aren't on sick leave for as long. They're going back to
Yeah,
work. They're
yeah.
pumping it back into the economy. You invest it in public transport, people are getting work easier. They're pumping it back into the economy. If you invest it in sorting out homeless problem, where you get people off the streets back as tax-paying citizens, it's fine this is the
Well,
argument. This is
you're
the
slowly
Jeremy
starting to
Corbyn
enter into
argument.
my part of the world where looking after people after they come out of hospital.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
That isn't even that's barely funded at all, and yet um, the alternative is these people end up back in hospital,
yeah.
bed clogging.
So just for the viewers, my dad works in it's cooking a nursing home. So
Can I say the name? The group.
yeah, yeah,
It's a charity called Leonard Cheshire, which looks after disabled of all degrees, from cerebral palsy to spina bifida, um, all the ranges.
mm,
And if we weren't there, all these people would be in a hospital.
yeah, yeah. And this is exactly what I'm saying. Like, this is the argument. This was the old Jeremy Corbyn argument that you can get yourself into masses of debt and borrow loads of money if you're investing it in all these areas that need fixing, because you will grow the economy. And then the other argument is Keir Starmer's argument is, no, you can't put the country into loads of debt. You can't piss off billionaires and tax them like crazy, because they'll piss off out of the country. And like I say, this is what I'm going to do with the podcast. I want to bring some economic experts on to talk about these, because honestly, it really fries my brain when I think about these two things. Like,
Yeah,
I don't know.
you're right. The point is, you and I can only speculate. Um, it's a bit like, I'm not stupid. You can't afford to alienate the mega rich and the big companies, because we're on a worldwide market. If they don't like it here, they just move all their assets to another country where it's more beneficial to them.
Yeah,
So you've got to keep them happy to a certain extent. So don't get me wrong, I'm not here to rob all the rich to give to the poor.
and it's that is the balancing act, isn't it? That's what
Yeah.
we need
So
to get
yeah, if you
right.
can get some experts on to explain, because
Mm,
I'd love to hear that. I'd
yeah,
love to.
yeah. And well, I mean, the thing is, it's a constant cycle, because when you think of the Labour Party, they don't seem to be able to get elected when they go for these style economics with Jeremy Corbyn and even Ed Miliband to a certain extent. It takes Keir Starmer to go back to that balance in the book style economics to get elected, because the general public deem that as sensible. That they've had the last 15 years of the Tories telling them, we need austerity, we can't spend too much, we can't spend, we have to balance the books, we can't spend. So it's kind of ingrained in our psyche now that this is how you run a country. And like I say, when Jeremy Corbyn comes out and says something completely different, it scares people. And it takes
Yes.
Keir Starmer to actually get the Labour Party elected. And this is the big argument that people that like Keir Starmer have, is that he's said all this stuff and he's doing all this stuff to get elected, and he'll become more left wing economics once he's in power. But we're not really seeing that. I mean, it's still early days.
I think
Um,
I think Keir Starmer, his problem is his public profile. He doesn't really have one, does he?
mm,
When you think of, well, let's go back, like Boris Johnson. It was all full of. He was out there. He was in your face. You saw him all the time, and it took quite a while before you realised he didn't actually have any substance behind him. We just went along with all the bravado that he was putting out. Keir
yeah.
Starmer's the opposite. He's probably got a lot of substance behind him, but he's not putting anything out there to give people confidence up front.
It's an interesting point, because what does make a good leader? Like, I've mentioned that, I really like Ed Miliband and I like Jeremy Corbyn as well, but I don't think they were great leaders. They're great in a role in government. Give them a minister's job like Ed Miliband, sort out energy. I'd think Jeremy Corbyn would be greatly suited in a job as a minister, okay, sort out homelessness. Jeremy Corbyn, go off and sort
Yeah,
out homelessness. In a leader, you kind of need someone that people like, that can speak well in interviews and speeches, but just be very, very good at delegating. I think, it's the same
but
in any job, really, isn't it? If you're a
it
manager.
is the hardest thing. Like you, Mark, I spent 30 years with my own business, and yes, the hardest lesson I had to learn was to delegate. In the early days when I started employing people, all too often I'd sort of elbow my way in and say, "Oh, for God's sake, I'll do it." And then I suddenly realised, hang on, I'm paying these people an absolute fortune just to stand there and watch me doing the job.
Hmm.
And I think it's the same in government, that the Prime Minister needs to delegate, giving him more time to be on the media and up front and telling people what good they're doing.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
I think at the moment, Keir Starmer is too busy getting his hands dirty, getting in there, that he's not telling us what good he's doing. So it's left the door wide open for the media to start putting out all these stupid rumours. Um, Now they're on this big smear campaign about how much freebies he's had. Well, when you actually look at it, majority of that is going to Arsenal football, which I think. Uh, do you class that as a freebie, or you know?
I don't know about this
You want
actually.
it?
I'm not familiar with this one, but
Oh,
because
have you not been on the day's news? Oh no, he's apparently he's gone on. He's uh, had 2.5 times more freebies than any other politician in history.
freebies, what, free tickets to go see Arsenal?
Well, holidays, flights. But
Okay.
when you actually look at the article, majority of that is because he's a big Arsenal fan and he gets invited into the director's box whenever he
Mm,
goes.
mm,
Well, if you and I wanted to go to the director's box, it would probably cost you £10,000 a game.
yeah.
But as they've said, you can't expect somebody like him to be stood in the stands in Arsenal, could you?
Mm, mm. Yeah.
So
I mean, I
again, they've blown it up out of all proportion.
yeah. I mean, I don't know the specifics of that one, but I did say that. I know for a fact, I know that Keir Starmer has had to do some deals with some people with money to get into power, to get into the position that he's in now. Um, he can't rely on the Labour donations anymore. This is another thing that I really liked about Corbyn, is he got his money from individual. He increased Labour membership massively, especially with the young people were signing on for Labour membership left, right, and centre. He funded the Labour Party with small membership donations, which I think is the way forward with politics. Take money
Yeah.
from
Oh
billionaires
yeah.
away. But Starmer had to fund the Labour Party a different way. So I know he's had to make some deals with some not nice people.
Well, when you finish this, you want to check it out. You could look at this smear campaign that's going on at the moment. Uh, is it that he's claiming 2.5 times as many freebies as other ones, or is it that he's more honest and he's actually telling you that he's got it, rather than the
Yeah,
likes of a lot of other, especially Conservative MPs, were keeping it quiet until they got found out?
exactly. But I mean, going back to Starmer and leadership, I I've I'm just hoping, like we were saying about delegation, I just really hope that he just uses the people that he has. I don't have a massive amount of faith in him, to be honest, but I do have faith for a lot of the people that work for him. I mentioned Ed Miliband with the energy. You've got Angela Rayner, that her big thing with the campaign for the Labour government is that she wants to make all new house builds a large percentage for social housing and council. It basically just increased the stock of
Well,
council
they've
housing and
got to do
social
that because
housing.
Maggie Thatcher sold all them off, didn't she?
Yeah, and I can deal with Starmer if he lets these people do their job and do a good job. I know she's insanely passionate about that. I know
Yeah.
you like Angela Rayner as well, and if he can if he can, basically, if he can just butt out of people's business and do what we just said, just delegate, just do your speeches, meet your world leaders, and let the people that are put the right people in the right positions
Well,
to
this
do
is
the
why
right
I'm
job.
prepared to sit back and see what the reality is. As you're saying, if he can put the right ministers in charge of the right departments, then it's going to be great.
Mm.
Unfortunately, for the last umpteen years, it's been the old pals network when you sit around the table in number 10, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is the big argument. I mean, Starmer's Labour are business as usual. They call it neoliberal politics. You know, it started with Margaret Thatcher, continued with Tony Blair, and now Conservatives, and then Starmer. It's business as usual, and there's not anything radical. And the question that is being brought up here is because we've had COVID. Sometimes with a radical situation, we had it back in after the Second World War with Clement Attlee. He needed to rebuild Britain. We needed to go on a massive council house build. He invented the NHS. You know, sometimes after something like that, I don't think we've had anything this significant after COVID. We've had to borrow trillions of pounds. Do you need something radical after that to actually improve the country? Or is just status quo, but a little bit better, maybe, with Starmer the way forward? This is the
Well,
crossroads that we're at.
I think the thing is, uh, the only thing that really worries me is, and it's something you and I have agreed on as well, is that the voting system in this country stinks.
Yeah.
That we're always only ever going to get Conservative or Labour. We're just going to bounce from one to the other. And the two parties absolutely hate each other that much that whoever gets in power usually destroys everything the one before did. Life doesn't work. You know, in your own home economics, you can't scrap everything. You can change things, you can improve on things, but to scrap it and start again every 5 minutes is disaster.
Yeah, but basically, what you're saying is that you're never actually going to get anything
No,
radical when you've just got two
no,
parties that are trying to
it
please
worries
everyone.
me the fact that we've lurched from a Conservative government with a huge majority to a Labour government with a huge majority, which means if anybody objects to anything, nothing can be done.
Yeah, yeah,
Whereas if you had the proportional representation that we've talked about, you'd have enough MPs in there to say, hang on a minute, no, you can't be doing that, we object.
mm. Yeah. It's true. I mean, it's a massive reason why we stay so stagnant in this country is the
Yes,
voting
it
system,
is.
and nothing radical
Yeah,
can
the
actually.
point is, Germany is more or less has always been a coalition with a leader. And look, they've done all right out of it.
Yeah, yeah, but you know, you can find no bigger advocate. But the interesting thing about the voting system is that is another policy that is popular with the public now, especially as
Yeah, but it's
folks
not
on.
popular with Conservatives or Labour. So all of a
Well,
sudden,
it's not
change it, aren't
popular
they?
with the it's not popular with the parties, but with the general public. So everyone during the previous Conservative tenure that wanted that lot out were massively in favour of changing the voting system because they felt aggrieved. But now you've actually had it on the other side where you've got your reform voters that are now pissed off with the voting system, and they were quite happy with it before when they were voting for Brexit, when they were voting for Boris
Oh yeah,
Johnson. They
yeah.
were quite happy with it, but now it's gone against them. So both sides of the political spectrum over the country are now aggrieved with this voting system. So I think it is inevitable. I think it's just a question of how long.
I'd
I've
like to
all
think it will happen. I probably won't see it in my lifetime, but
Yeah. I just it's popular with the Labour members. They voted on this. Just the general public that are members of the Labour Party. They've had a vote on this. They wanted to change it, but obviously, as you just mentioned, it serves Labour to have this swing system because they get a majority every 10 years or so. So it
yeah.
serves them. But
Point is, when you think about it, our political system is hundreds of years old, and life has moved on somewhat in the last few hundred years.
Oh god, yeah.
And really, our politics should move with it, shouldn't it?
Well, this is the argument that I was just saying, that this country really needs an absolute uphold from the bottom. Everything needs to change. The way
We
we
need
do
a revolution.
politics. Yeah. Oh, literally, you can pick any aspect of this country, and it needs sorting out from the bottom. And yeah, the political system, the money in politics, the House of Lords, all these things just
Oh, yeah.
need to be changed.
Yeah, in a way, you wish the country was a bit like a computer. You can pull the plug on it, leave it 20 seconds, and re-plug it back in so it reboots.
That's a good start. So I'm not going to have you on without not talking about Brexit. And there's and it does coincide.
I hang my head in shame. I voted for Brexit, and I absolutely think that was the worst vote I've ever done in my entire life.
But
I got hooked on it. I don't know.
The important thing is this is what I really want to talk about now, is that so many people feel the same, and
Yeah.
there's with going back to Keir Starmer, another one of the things that I'm a bit upset with him at the moment is he still seems to be so scared of the Brexit voter, even though he's just won a massive majority. He's got 5 years in government. He still doesn't want to move any step closer to Europe, even the smallest thing. So recently, basically the EU came to us and said, can we do, I don't know whether you heard about this, but can we do a visa scheme for under 30s? So anyone in Europe under 30 can move to Britain for 3 years and work and go to school and
hadn't heard of
education.
that seems like a good idea to me.
Yeah, a completely reasonable idea.
Yeah.
It's not going back to freedom of movement. No one can just come and go as they please. Just under 30s, so to fill a lot of gaps in your labour market, to come and go to university and pump money into our economy. And it just seems like such a legitimate thing. But Keir Starmer has said no, because he's still so petrified of this Brexit voter, and it just seems so bizarre to me that you go on.
Perhaps we need more of your podcasts to show that Keir Starmer that us Brexit voters are recognise how wrong we were, on almost every single aspect. Uh, we, I think there was a big campaign by the Conservative Party, for probably their own personal economic reasons. They wanted to leave Europe because when you think about it, the Conservative Party had a huge campaign to leave Europe, but the campaign to remain in Europe was so watered down, it was unbelievably weak. And they allowed propaganda to be used without being challenged. One of them was the freedom of movement. We was all worried that we was going to have lots of Eastern Bloc people flooding the country and taking over. Well, the reality is, bear in mind, my next door neighbour, they're a Polish couple. They've just had a lovely little baby. Like you and I, they've just come over. They're pair of them are working like anything, putting a lot of money into our economy. And yeah, they will go back one day. They admit it.
Yeah, and yeah, this is what I'm talking about. Is so many people now, like yourself, are actually understanding what we had in the EU. It really is now only the real hard-lined sort of racists and people like that are still entrenched in Brexit being good for the country. I swear, if you'd done another vote tomorrow, I reckon it would be about 70% Remain. And
I reckon it'd be higher than that.
Probably, maybe, who knows? But it's around there somewhere.
Because of the age I am, obviously I've got a group of friends that are all 70 plus, and even them, I'd say there's only a small handful who are still hardened Brexit was the right thing.
Mm,
And they're the type of people who do live in the past very much so. You know, they still
yeah,
talk about the Second World War when they weren't even alive themselves.
yeah. Well, the stupid thing is that even some of the racists are starting to come round to the EU because they're seeing, well, okay, we used to have a lot of Labour come in from European countries, white people, and now they're seeing that we're having to replace that Labour with people from Africa, from India that maybe they don't
yeah,
like so much. Even some of the racists are starting to get on board. I think the only people that are still now in this Brexit cult are the ones that think that basically the EU is like a corrupt organization that is looking I don't know, but they don't want to be a part of it. Even like I've spoken to real hardline Brexit voters before. I've had them on the channel, and they've said, I've said that you can't ignore the obvious fact that Brexit is making the country poorer, and they've said, I don't care. I'd be happy for the country to be poorer and be out of that organisation. So there's people, they're the only ones that are left now that just have this absolute hatred for the EU. They're the only ones that are left now. So this is why I really struggle with Keir Starmer still not taking tiny little steps to get closer to EU. He's all about growing the economy. This is the big thing. This is what he got voted in for, to grow the British economy. And the first obvious step is closer ties with Europe.
I'm surprised. Now, I didn't realise that, Mark. You surprised me by that because, yes, I was hoping that he would do lead us back into
Mm.
closer ties. Because at the moment, because we've got this hard line, we hate Europe, then it's obviously then Europe are just making life hard for us. It's quite obvious that they're making uh, they're using us as a little whipping post to anybody else who might be thinking about it and saying, look, this is
Mm.
what will happen to you if you think along the same lines. Look what we'll destroy England at this rate.
Yeah.
Um, but they, as you say, they are olive branches are being held out from Europe, and we should be grabbing them with both hands at the moment. And you say about under 30, I wouldn't object to opening the borders from that Europe to Europe, uh, because this country relies on uh, migrant workers.
Mm.
Now, bear in mind, back in the 80s, we did the same. We were going over to Germany because we could earn more money over there
Alvida's
to
own
work.
pet.
Well,
I
yeah,
always
yeah.
think of.
That's why that program was made. It was made because it recognised the fact that there was a whole army of people going over to Germany
Yeah.
to earn money.
Yeah, I mean, this is what I find so bizarre. This is one of the most bizarre things that I found about Keir Starmer is I don't understand why he's still pandering to people that will never vote for him, that never have
No,
voted for him, but he still seems to be pandering for these hardcore Brexit voters that are all going to be voting Reform in the next election. I
well,
don't
this is it.
understand. It makes no sense
They
to
were
me.
either majority of them were Conservative voters anyway, because Conservatives, when you think about it, was the only big party that was in favour of Brexit, weren't they?
Yeah, yeah,
And that's again, you're now back to um, any one party having a big majority, because obviously the whip was telling all the Conservative MPs to get on board the Brexit boat.
hmm, yeah. It's the thing is, I mean, there's so many questions to why Keir Starmer is doing this. Maybe he's got a long term goal. Maybe he thinks it's not the right time. Maybe, and there is questions of losing face and also, full entry back into the EU. We don't even know if they'd have us back after all this anyway. But I
Probably not
think
at the moment.
at least moves to get back into the single market and the customs union.
Yeah,
But also that a lot of the damage has already been done, and you can't go back anyway. You mentioned about European labour coming over to England, but if you use nurses and doctors as an example, our pay is not competitive to over in Europe.
No.
because of what's happened and because of a lot of the damage from Brexit. I mean, as soon as Brexit was announced, the value of the pound went down. So straight
Yeah.
away, all the money that we have invested in the NHS is not buying us the same level of stuff that we had before, and salaries, and the economy as a whole has been massively affected. So we've damaged ourselves so much because of Brexit that if we did do closer ties, and even if we did eventually go back in, we're not going to be competitive for nurses and doctors to
No.
come over anyway.
The irony was when we were in, we were a big power. We were
Yeah.
one of the top countries, as you say. If we went back now, we'd be cap in hand, and we'd be one of the we'd be below a lot of the Eastern Bloc countries, wouldn't we?
Yeah. No. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe Starmer has got some plan in the future. I don't know, but it
Well, I
really
think
does baffle me. Just not even for this small little step of just granting visas for
this
under
is where,
30s.
getting back to what I say, that Keir Starmer really needs to have a bit of a public profile. We need to be hearing some of the good stuff he's doing. At the
Mm.
moment, because we're not hearing from him, it's allowing the media to feed all this vile stuff out there.
Yeah, he needs to be
He
a lot
should be
more
out there
direct.
defending himself, saying, "Look,
Mm.
okay, it's not looking good at the moment, but I've got this, this, and this
Mm.
planned for the future."
Well, I mean, people are gonna read and hear and believe what they want about this Labour government, but the most important thing that Starmer needs to do to get people on side is just results. They need to start having
Yeah,
some
yeah, oh,
serious
yeah.
results. You know,
That's why I said I'm happy to sit back, ignore a lot of the media, and wait until the budget to see what the reality is of what he is intend doing, because I think that will actually show us the direction he intends going, I think.
Mm.
But I know if my wife watches this, she's going to totally object. But as you
object
know,
object to what? Just Starmer in general, or is she? Sorry,
I don't think she's a big fan. Let's put it that way.
yeah, yeah. I know. I mean, I don't know if we want to talk about that.
No,
But this is the thing.
I
I mean,
did
this.
say perhaps she ought to join you on one of these podcasts. She said no, I'll get too angry.
She's more than happy to come on at some point, but this is exactly what I'm saying. If Starmer's going to turn around people's opinions, you know, like your wife, he just needs results. He just needs results
Yeah,
in
yeah.
certain areas. And when the
Well,
next election comes along, I think if there's sort of three key things that have been sorted out: a serious improvement in the NHS, a
yeah,
serious improvement in our utility bills and cost of living. Um, Even just those two, really. If there's some serious work being done in those two areas, cost of living and NHS, then he'll win another term. He just
well, I'd
needs to
like to
show.
think in a year's time I can turn round to wife and say, look, you were wrong. Because as we, before he was elected, you said that we need a period of boring politics, and if boring politics gets us back online, then I'm with it.
I'm
Whether I
good, yeah.
like the guy or not is irrelevant.
Well, this is the thing. We've had years and years of bloody Boris Johnson clowning around, bloody Liz
Yeah,
Truss, Farage sticking his nose in wherever he thinks he can get the limelight. You know, I just want someone, like I said, that is boring and is a good delegator and puts the right people in the right jobs and really makes a dent in sorting out this country. So,
well, because every time the Conservatives announced a cabinet shuffle, you looked at it and you thought, well, they're only there because it's the old boys' network, or they've obviously turned around to the prime minister and say, look, me, if you want this group of MPs backing you, then you better give me a decent job.
oh yeah, I mean, there's ridiculous stats over the last Conservative government of having about eight health secretaries in the space of 10 years.
Yeah.
You know, they shuffle them around
They had a
because they've
chancellor
lost
that was
favour with someone, or they you know, not because they feel someone would be better for the job. It's
yeah.
just because
Well, let's
ridiculous.
face it, the chancellor they ended up with had been a failure in every department he'd ever worked in. So,
Yeah.
something to put him in charge of the country's economics seemed a nightmare when they told me he was going to be in charge.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
he destroyed. He did a big chunk of destroying the NHS, and you've got the impression that uh, out the back door, he was probably making quite a bit of money out of selling bits off.
Yeah, no, I mean, you speak to any nurse, and obviously my wife being a nurse, and anyone in the NHS that's worked in the NHS over the last 10 years, they'll say Jeremy Hunt was the worst
Yeah.
health secretary and done the most damage to the NHS possible. But yeah, anyway, I think that's where we'll wrap it up now. We touched
So
on Brexit at
your
the end.
viewers can now witness the fact that you've turned me completely round from a Brexit voter to I wish we could wind the clock back a few years and retake that vote.
Well, the thing is, we'll just end with this. I mean, at the time of Brexit, it was a difficult time when I was talking to you about the EU and stuff because, and I think I said this on the last video, some of our conversations I knew were going to end up in argument, and that the last thing that I wanted, and this has actually happened with a lot of family members during Brexit, is they've seriously fallen out. They've had raging arguments where it's got really heated, and at the time I didn't want that descending in that, so I kind of in a way sort of just shut up and just zipped my mouth up, and part of me thinks, well, maybe I should have sort of stood
Well,
my
maybe you
ground a
should
bit
have.
more, but at the end of the day, your vote would have mean diddly squat. I mean, it was 2
Yeah, no,
million.
but it's a moral thing. You see, I
Yeah,
now because of it, I feel partly guilty. Okay, I was only one of how many thousands people voted, but I still feel morally partly guilty.
yeah, but I also have
But
no ill feelings for anyone that voted Brexit because, I mean, you just described yourself the difference in the campaign. I don't think the Remain campaign could have done anything more than they'd done. It was just the pure simple fact that the Remain campaign was boring, complicated economics, and this is what I'm saying, it's complicated
I,
stuff to understand. The ins and outs of trade deals and all this sort of stuff is very complex. I struggle with it a lot, and it's
I think
boring complex economics, but the argument for leaving was simple to understand, and you get people like Nigel
yeah,
Farage that come along and they say the reason
yeah,
that you can't get a doctor's appointment is because of EU freedom of movement, which
and
is complete
again,
and utter
you actually had
nonsense.
people like Farage and Boris Johnson, both of which have a lot of charisma. They
Yeah,
put themselves out there,
yeah,
whereas the Remain was David Cameron, which was very much like Starmer, which sat back, was quietly spoken,
mm,
um, and that was the problem. The Remain group, they needed some politicians that had charisma, and
mm.
there just wasn't any.
Yeah, but the Leave campaign was easy to understand with charismatic people at the front. That was the main difference. So
Yeah.
this is why I
Oh
don't
yeah.
have any problem. If I'd watched a certain amount of videos, or if the social media algorithm had pointed me in a certain direction, I may have ended up voting Leave. It's just it
But,
was so easy to
but
sort of
if your
understand that
viewers
argument.
go back to our previous cast, uh, you've got to bear in mind that my generation had a lot of history. That really the Leave campaign uh, fueled it.
Yeah,
They recognised that history and prejudice we had about Europe, and they actually uh, jumped on that and
yeah.
generated the vote, didn't they?
Yeah, whenever you hear from Brexit voters like yourself, they generally always have some sort of anecdote from the past that really
Yeah.
fueled their decision. I know your one was about a bakery or something that had to change their equipment because of EU regulation, I believe.
Well,
I
yeah.
I think that
Also,
stuck in your head, didn't it?
yeah. The fact that we were tricked into it by a Conservative government. In fact, it's quite ironic, really. I felt as if it was a Conservative government that tricked us into entering it. It was a Conservative government that tricked us to leave it, which all seemed a bit strange to me.
Yeah, but it's everyone that I speak to that voted Brexit had one of these sort of anecdotal stories, like the one that I
Yeah.
just
Oh,
said with
yeah.
the bakery.
Yeah.
And it's always like, even my friend Dan had something similar where he was working for a business and there was some sort of EU regulation that they felt was wasting money.
Yeah.
But as I always say with Brexit, people have these little anecdotal stories and then that fixates with them. And they have negative opinions of the EU, and then they completely forget all the vast benefits, because a lot of the time they don't even understand them. You know, the vast benefits that we get from trade, the vast benefits we get from freedom of movement, all these amazing things that we get. But because of this one anecdotal story about this a bit of money that was wasted here or something, you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater, and you know that's what
Yes.
happens so much with the Brexit vote. And yeah, going back to those arguments, even though those arguments were so fundamentally wrong, I always think of Nigel Farage saying the basic argument from Farage: the reason that you can't get a doctor's appointment is because of freedom of movement. So obviously wrong, but basically it makes sense for people that don't know too much about the topic. Oh, you know, more people can come into the country, so more doctor's appointments. Not thinking that actually people that are coming into the country are workers of a young age that aren't really using the NHS in their 20s and 30s. That's not the reason that you can't get a doctor's appointment. The reason you can't get a doctor's appointment is because we've had 15 years of Tory austerity and they're not investing in it. But anyway, these arguments are easy to understand. And Nigel Farage, obviously, I cannot stand the man. I can't stand anything the man stands for. I have a passionate hatred for him, but he is probably the best politician in the country, effective politician. He is the most effective politician in the country of getting his message across. You know, I don't think there's any doubt about that. Over the last 15, 20 years, being effective as a politician, he's the best. And it's such a shame that he's on the wrong cause. I wish
Well,
he was on the
yes.
right
Yeah.
cause.
I will admit because he's not frightened to stand up and say what he believes, and even when people are jeering him and ridiculing him, he still just carries on with his message.
Mm,
And yeah, as you say, if he was on the right boat, then
yeah,
he'd be an asset.
exactly. And on that note, I think we'll wrap this one up. So thank you so much for having coming back, Dad. By
Yeah,
popular
no,
demand.
any time. It's just strange that the last one you and I were at opposite ends. So this time I think we've done more agreeing than
Yeah,
disagreeing.
yeah. Yeah, well, I think we had a lot of agreement on the last one at the end. Anyway, I think you'd
Yeah.
already made your decision that that Brexit was bad for the country
I
at
think
that
the
point.
point
Anyway.
is, you touched on that you kept quiet on a few occasions. I personally think in our family we've got a good relationship in the fact that we can talk, we can have totally opposite opinions, but at the end of the day, we respect each other's opinions and we give each other a big hug and we still carry on.
Yeah,
We don't have to go, say I'm never going to speak to you again.
that's definitely what we need more of in the
Yeah,
world
just talk.
of
If the whole
fair
world
and
would talk,
open.
we wouldn't have any wars. Just people just talking. That's all they need. You
Mm,
know, as we've said, all these immigrants that we're worried about, 99.9% of them are just ordinary people who just want to get on with a bit of life,
yeah,
look after, put a bit of food on the table for their family, and just get on. You and
exactly.
I, we've travelled. How many nasty people do you meet when you travel? Almost zero.
Yeah, yeah. We're all just average guys and girls just trying to
You
get
know,
on in
where I'm
life.
working at the moment, we've got a lot of African people working with us at the moment. and I'm having a great laugh with a lot of them.
Of course. Because that's generally what we all want to do in life. We want to just
Yeah,
get on
yeah,
and be happy and try and get through working day as best we can.
yeah.
Excellent. Okay, well,
Okay.
we'll wrap it up there. Thanks for watching, guys. If you like the video, click a like. If you haven't subscribed, you can subscribe up top. There'll be another video. You can check that out as well. And there'll be another weekly podcast next week. And I'm sure I'll have my dad back at some point because he's popular. So.
Please do.